Welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. And we've me and Terry are on today to discuss our defensive options. I'm sure we can agree that the full-back areas are pretty much set in stone at the moment with the form of obviously Coleman and Dean, and kind of we know what they're about. But I think we can agree that the area of the pitch where is most up for debate at the moment is our centre-backs. I think in the right, they're all good defenders. They're all in form, relatively speaking. And I thought we'd just have a chat about our defenders and going forward, who's going to be our sort of go-to starting defenders. I think we'll start with who I would consider at the moment our best defender. I'm not sure you'll agree with this, so we'll move on. Michael Keane. Obviously, I've been a huge fan of Michael Keane now for about 10 years, right from his Burnley days, because obviously a big fan of the way he was set up there, and he was someone I wanted to buy. He didn't work out at first, but I think he's improved as time's gone on, Michael Keane. But obviously, if you can talk about both in retrospect and sort of how he is now, what do you make of Michael Keane as a defender?
Well, I've gone back and forth on Keane a lot since he's been here. When he signed, I was really happy with him, and especially in his first little run. Even though it was the Koeman sort of like meltdown, I've always felt he was our best defender because he was alongside Ashley Williams, an aging Phil Jagielka, and very young Mason Holgate. But then he came out the team, and I always felt no, he will. A lot of people turned on him and thought he wasn't very good, and I was always one of his defenders saying, no, he will be good. He's carrying an injury. He had like a strange gash on top of his foot, I think it was, and he couldn't shake that off for ages. And every time he'd get back, it'd open up, and this is around the Allardyce time. But when it was Marco Silva, I said, well, Michael Keane's, got it. He's, Silva's first season, said he's got it. He should be a starting centre-back. And it was either one of the other two, like alongside him, of Mina or Zoom, and it was at this point. Then I sort of went the other way. Like there was a time, in Marco Silva's second season, so the third season of having Keane, I sort of threw me, took me flag down. I was like, no, I don't think he has got it. He's a bag of nerves. He makes mistakes, so on and so forth. And I remember when do you remember this, even as late as Carlo Ancelotti being the manager, do you remember when we played Crystal Palace and he brought Michael Keane in and dropped Yerry Mina? It was Mina and Holgate.
No, it wasn't. There was Mina and Keane for the Palace game.
Sorry, you're right. Yeah, because Holgate had obviously come to life and got into a really great vein of form and, established himself in the team. And he played every minute, every game up until that point, hasn't he? And I was like, that going, what are you bringing Keane in for? He's crap. That's how late I was like not sold on Keane, because I'd gone from his, a defender to a doubter, and now I've gone back the other way because since he's come back from lockdown, it's not an opinion, that isn't very, it's not an opinion that's specific to me. I think everyone's seen since he's come back from lockdown, he's just grown and grown and grown, and now I'm at the point where from the start of this season we're talking about the defence. What's our best defence? I think he's the first name in the defence on it, in the centre backs at least. Obviously, as you said at the beginning, I think there's no argument. It's going to be Luca Dean and Seamus Coleman, but I think it's this video. I mean, certainly for me and you, is who partners Michael Keane, because Michael Keane is just the undisputed best centre-back at the club at the minute based on form, and it's not a short sample of form either. It's been for several months. He's become a different player, so I've swung back and forth a lot on him, but now I'm back firmly in his camp. I think he's a fantastic player. He's just come on leaps and bounds.
As I've said at the start, for years now, I've been a huge fan of Michael Keane in terms of what he's about as a defender. I think he's a really good defender. I think his aerial abilities, I think, is really good. I think in both boxes now, I think we're seeing in when we go for a corner, he's always getting on the end of it, which was something even in his Burnley days, he wasn't really prolific. He got the odd one important goals, better than what he has done previously here. But I think what he's producing at the moment is pretty much unrivaled in terms of aerial ability in both boxes. Obviously, he's been fantastic. I had the agenda that I think he should be starting at pretty much get every game for Everton up until I think the Brighton game. Remember when we got beat 3-2?
Yeah.
And Aaron Connolly was diving and everywhere. He was poor that day. He got dragged out of position everywhere. I thought, look, I've been his biggest fan probably, but even me now, I can't really make a case for him starting and not giving Mason Holgate a chance. But I think it was around the time Holgate just came in for the Watford game in the Cup and was excellent. So I was probably of that opinion that Holgate should come in. He did. And then obviously Silva got sacked, and so went the suicidal high line. And then Carlo Ancelotti came in, and I think it was Keane and it was Mina and Holgate for a while, and I was fine with that because I thought they complemented each other really well. And then there was, I don't know, there was a sort of a turning point where Michael Keane got thrown back in. And even before he got thrown back in, you could tell Carlo Ancelotti was a fan of Michael Keane because he went on that BT Sports interview with, I think, Des Kelly. And he name-dropped Michael Keane as a player who's going to come forward with him in this sort of rebuild at Everton. And that surprised me because he hadn't really played at that point. So that told me that he's going to be around. I think, obviously, then he got rewarded with a new contract. And then I think we've had this conversation many times. As soon as he was given that new contract, he was no longer Ronald Koeman's player. He was Carlo Ancelotti's player because he showed that sort of trust in him. And then since we've come back after lockdown and we've continued into the new season, I would go as far as to say, even if you go back to when we were playing the last sort of ebbs of last season, if you go from then to now, he's been our most consistent player throughout that time in terms of performances in every game, except maybe I think he was poor when we played Wolves away. He got dragged everywhere that day, but pretty much that was the only sort of blip in his sort of new Everton career since his contract. So for me, there isn't any doubt that he's our number one centre back at the moment. I think people question his pace, sort of his ability to sort of play in a high line, but I think Carlo's dealt with that really well. I think he's put legs around him, both in full back and sort of whole midfield areas this season. For me, no questions for me over Michael Keane. Would he be both in our, if we sort of had a dream that everyone was fit at the moment, would we both go for Michael Keane as one of the centre backs?
Yeah, definitely. The full backs, as we said, picked themselves, and I think Michael Keane picks himself. It's he's just such a good player this season. When he came back into the team, around after lockdown time, I sort of, even then I was, had to be convinced. I was like, is this just because we're playing 4-4-2 and he's back in a low block? And then he's improved because of that. But this season we haven't been playing the low block. We've been playing quite high, and he looks even better now than he did then. So yeah, I think that's pretty much nailed on. He's currently the top centre back at the club. So I'd say it's Michael Keane plus another.
The next person I wanted to move on to and discussing our centre back options is, I would say it's strange for me in a bit of a way because I'm a fan of his, but nevertheless he seems to split the fan base, and that's Yerry Mina. I think I'm a fan of Yerry Mina. I think he's another one who's had his ups and downs at Everton, but I'm overall a fan of his. You said you've had a little bit of a change of heart on Yerry Mina lately. What timeline, your thoughts on Yerry Mina?
My timeline isn't as up and down with Mina as it was on Keane, because obviously I went pro to anti to back to pro with Keane. I've always been quite pro Yerry Mina because he got a lot of stick at the beginning of his Everton career for being injured, like as if he could help that. We signed him injured, and he didn't establish himself straight away. And I think there's a good player in there. There's a good defender. Now, I haven't had a change of heart in the sense of I think he's crap and I don't want to see him play. But I'm now of the opinion, if everyone's fit, then it's got to be him or Michael Keane. It's Michael Keane. Like, I wouldn't have said that even as early as like 3 months ago, before last season. I'd have still said, if gun to my head, I'd have still said Yerry Mina over Michael Keane. But this season's just made me think otherwise. Like, no, based on all the information available, I'd say Michael Keane now. So for me, we've got 2 stoppers and 2 ball playing recovery centre backs. So it's one or the other. I think you can get away with playing Godfrey and Holgate, and we are getting away with playing Mina and Keane, but I think the ideal scenario would be one of each type, and I think there's just no that it's who's the better defender at the minute. It's Michael Keane. Yerry Mina's still got a place at the club. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that he's not good enough for us or anything like that, but for me, he's much further down the pecking order than he was not long ago. In my own mind, and if you said to me you've got to sell one of your 4 senior centre backs, obviously it's not going to be Godfrey because he's just signed. He now for me is one of the weaker, more sellable assets if it came to selling one of them, because his opposite number is competition for the stopper position. That role, that right-sided stopper and centre back, it's Keane, and I've come so far the other way on Keane. New contract and all, as you said, he's one of Carlo's men, and I think Yerry Mina is a useful player, but don't think he starts when everyone's fit.
No, I'm very much of the opinion that you can say, well, people might say in the comments, well, I think Keane and Mina are our best 2. You might be right, but I still don't think it's the best complement to what we want to play. I think you want to have someone who is strong aerially, and then you want to have someone who can sort of recover and sort of win the ball back from him, like a ball over the top or a through ball. And you can't necessarily, and like people might say Godfrey and Holgate. Don't know why they would come to that opinion of one game of Ben Godfrey, but they might say that. But equally, teams would just throw loads of crosses in the box. They're not brilliant aerially, so I think I think you're right. It's got to be Keane or Mina, and Holgate or Godfrey. And so, for me, Michael Keane wins the stopper role. I just think he's. We talk about confidence players, but I think Michael Keane's confidence at the moment is greater than Yerry Mina's. So Michael Keane starts from that side for me. Now I think we should move on to the sort of the recoverers, and Mason Holgate. I think he got injured at the end of last season, but really didn't put a foot wrong when he did play. In my opinion, I thought he was brilliant. I thought for a long period of time he was Everton's best player last season in terms of the consistency. I think he's really come on since that loan spell at West Brom. I think he was one for me before he went on loan. I wasn't a fan of him, and I was seeing him being sold. I weren't a fan of his. I thought if we can get a fee, if Eddie Howe's willing to spend 20 million on it, we should probably send him there, because it's that kind of sign he would make. But I think I've come completely other way with Mason Holgate. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a leader, and at the moment, I think if they're all fit, he would be the person I would start next to Michael Keane.
Yeah, I mean, Mason Holgate, alongside Calvert-Lewin, is the most improved player since Marco Silva left. So I say it like that, not from when Ancelotti came in, because I'm also including the Duncan Ferguson games. So, I don't know about you, I count that as one era. Carlo only came in on the Boxing Day, but Duncan Ferguson's still there, and obviously has a big say in, how things are going now. Mason Holgate surprised me. I'm not going to go over it again. Like, you've said it, I've said it on previous videos that I was not a believer in Mason Holgate. I just didn't think he had it. And he's proved me, and then everyone else who was of the same mind, wrong, because he just became invaluable. Like, he's versatile. As you said, he's a leader. He's quick and he's good on the ball. He wants like times he can, play that key pass from centre back. Even though he's been playing left centre back and he's right footed, he's got the confidence to step out and play like balls through the lines, which is something that Michael Keane started. This is turning into a Michael Keane love letter, this segment, but Michael Keane started. He started passing really well this year, but historically, Holgate's been the best passer of the centre backs, but his concentration hasn't been there. But I think he's improved that a lot in the past 12 months. So I would say I would agree with you. I think at the minute our first choice centre back partnership would be Keane and Holgate when everyone's fit, because then you've got that good combination. They obviously get on very well together and have got like a good understanding. And we can't really, we're going to touch on Godfrey in a second, but you couldn't really make a case yet for Godfrey to start over Holgate, because, you know, even if you paid a lot of attention to him at Norwich, which to be honest I didn't. I saw Norwich when they played us and then never really bothered.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, carry on. I'll say what I was going to say in a minute.
Well, I would just say that literally it'd be Keane and Holgate as the partnership, with the third, you know, the first centre back to come in would be Godfrey, and I'll explain. I'll let you say what you want to say, and I'll explain why in a second.
No, all I was going to say is my watching of Norwich was just laughing around how many goals they were conceding on the weekly and just getting battered every week. That was as much as I paid attention to Norwich, other than when he slapped us across Goodison.
Well, the third, you know, my statement then was I'd have Ben Godfrey as the third centre back, and that's like, you know, you might think, really, he's played right back for 5 minutes, and you know, or however long it was, and you're putting him ahead of Yerry Mina. Yes, I like Yerry Mina, but I'll tell you why. I watched the England under-21s in the international break for the sole purpose. I never do usually watch even the England senior team, but I was in by myself. Mrs. was on a shift, and it was on, and I knew Godfrey was playing. So I thought we hadn't seen him yet, or he hadn't played for Everton yet. When I watched him, he played left-sided centre back, and he has a lot of the traits that Holgate has. Like he steps out with the ball, he passes, he's got good recovery pace. He's faster than Holgate, I'll tell you that for free straight away.
There he is.
But the reason I think he should be the third choice, on, you know, unless he was to establish himself even more and be, you know, get higher, is that he's also got, you know, the physicality, not quite as big as Yerry Mina, obviously, but he's got far more physicality than Holgate. So he's like a nice blend between Holgate and Mina. He's built like a fruit machine. He's absolutely, he's broad. He's broad and strong across the chest, whereas you could play him in place of Holgate and not lose any of the pace or the passing ability. Or you could play him alongside Holgate with instead of Michael Keane, if he was the third defender coming in for an injury, and he'd still have the physical presence that he wouldn't, you say they throw a load of crosses in, depending on who the striker is, he'd still be able to hold his own well more than Mason Holgate would, because he's bigger, physically more imposing. So I think you could play Godfrey with any of the other players, because he's got a bit of both, whereas the others are all specialists in their style of play. Holgate's really quick and he's good on the ball, but he's not that strong. Michael Keane's probably, he's one of the better passers and he's the better stopper. Yerry Mina's the biggest and the strongest, but Godfrey's got like a little bit of all of them. So for me, it'd be Keane, Holgate, Godfrey is the one to come in, and then Mina would be fourth choice, unfortunately.
I probably would agree with that. I think another thing what we really sort of need to sort of mention here is I think we like all four centre backs really. I think any of the four players, I don't think we would have an issue with that. The reason why, and this is the reason I like the Godfrey sign, is because of the pace. Both of our fullbacks like to spend time in the opposition half attacking, sort of linking up with the attack. Obviously, the way the Premier League's gone so far this season, it's been quite a sort of fast-paced attacking league. If we're to sort of limit the amount of chances the opposition's going to get against us, it would be really nice to have a Ben Godfrey, even a Holgate, because Holgate's not slow, to sort of recover through counter-attack. So let's say Luca Dean loses the ball on the edge of the opposition's box on Sunday, and James Ward-Prowse hits his eyes, he'll go as he likes to do, and Danny Ings runs on it. Godfrey could be there to recover, win the ball back and play through the lines. I think as we progress as a team, we need to be a team now. And I know I don't love possession football, but to be able to sort of assert our dominance on the opposition more by restricting how much they can do with the ball, I think Godfrey gives us a better opportunity to do that than a straight Mina Keane partnership, which, lends itself more to a narrow low block, whereas a Godfrey and a Keane partnership sort of allows you to press high, because then if the opposition sort of plays a long ball out and beat the press that way, you've got the aerial sort of ability of Michael Keane or Yerry Mina if any of them play. And then, but if they beat the press, sort of play an intricate passing and then sort of a one round the corner, you've got the pace of Holgate or Godfrey to sort of balance that out. So I think we've got good options, and I think going forward, I think we can both be happy with them playing, but in sort of their own styles of play rather than a mix and match. I think that's kind of what we're going to take from this, that there has to be a sort of definite sort of difference between the two centre-backs rather than Keane, Mina. I know you say you would be happy with Holgate and Godfrey, but the worry for me would be that we would play a team with a big target man. We would press high and they would just lump it to the target man, hold the ball up, and then we'd be caught up the pitch instead of having Keane who'd sort of physically be able to keep up with him more than any of the others. But I think we're happy with any of the four. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, not really. It's just I always think, when you're assessing squad depth, and I always think this, I apply this to any time we sign a player as well, is would you be happy if you had to play any of them? Would you panic if you had to play your second choice, or would you just go, okay, that's fine? And obviously there's areas of the pitch where you go, well, you can't help it, where you go, oh, well, what's your second choice for James Rodriguez? And you sort of go, we haven't got one, we're just going to make two. Like, what's your second choice for Calvert-Lewin? We haven't got one, we're going to just make two. We're at centre-back, we haven't got that problem. I wouldn't be upset to see any one of the four we've got start in any combination. Like, obviously, there's I think possibly one of the weakest combinations would be Keane and Mina, and on the top of the league playing them.
Yeah.
So obviously not that bad, are they? So I wouldn't go into any game with a combination of those four centre backs. Or if we got an injury to one of the starting centre backs, I wouldn't panic and go, "What are we going to do?" Whereas you're obviously going to do that with other positions. It's one of the most well balanced and well stocked areas of the squad, and we haven't even touched on Jared Branthwaite. So I don't think he shouldn't be in the conversation for starting, certainly not. But it just goes to show, even outside those four players, there's still some very good options there. He did better than anyone I think thought he would do in the post lockdown games. And he's now gone to what, fifth choice, and he's still capable. I think he might need a loan out to get some proper football, but he's another one. If we were to cash in on one of the four, I think he could slot in as well.
I've got a question for you in terms of one of the centre backs we haven't touched upon yet. But in terms of, I think obviously we all know that sort of at some point, I feel like we say it every summer, but at some point FFP will eventually catch up with us in terms of what we actually can do. In that respect, I think we've said if we got an offer for Mina, we would be more inclined to take it than the other three. But something that Liverpool's been doing really well for you, I don't want Liverpool clubs all over the place doing well, but Liverpool seem to do really well and get big money for sort of young players who played 5 minutes off the bench, is Lewis Gibson now. And obviously Lewis Gibson's had several loans. For me, obviously with the centre-backs that we got next summer, and I think it's bold statements and people might disagree, but I would take money for him next summer if we got we're not going to get loads of money, but an offer that's acceptable next summer, I would take it, just because if you take money for him, you can do something maybe a bit more in another position. And I don't see him in a month of Sundays starting above any of the centre-backs we've mentioned, including Jared Branthwaite. So is that something you would consider?
Yeah, 100%. Like, he was he probably still is highly thought of at the club, but the landscape's changed. We've had a change of manager, different players have come in, and it happens all the time. It's unfortunate for him, but he's he's now, let's be honest, the sixth choice centre back, and he's gone to the Championship. I think if we can get money we can make money on him. We're not going to do what Liverpool do and sell players who haven't done a tap for massive money, because no one else is able to do that. But we paid 6 million for Lewis Gibson, remember, off Newcastle. So I'd want to either get the money back for that or, make a bit of money. And if he does well in the Championship, there's loads of clubs who could come in for him. Like, the Championship well better than I do, but I can immediately just think Norwich, someone like that, to go right there. Exactly. One of the Bournemouth, they haven't got Eddie Howe anymore, but like one of those teams who don't play with big centre-backs, they play with young footballing centre-backs. If that's their style, then he'd be ideal.
There's loads of clubs in the Championship that would go with that. I think Blackburn might be a good fit for him in terms of thinking stylistically. He's good in the ball. They like to knock the ball about a bit. He might be good for them. But I do think that's an interesting point to bring up.
He's been unfortunate, really. That Branthwaite came in when he was on loan and was better than people would expect. And nobody when we bought Branthwaite, thought he was going to come in and play any first team minutes. But he's obviously got in training and impressed, and he's got more minutes than Gibson's ever got now. And that's just unfortunate. Gibson's done what he's been advised to do by the club, is go out on loan and drop down the pecking order. Then we've signed another centre back because the opportunity came up. So it's just all happened, and that's just football. It's not the end of his career, but it's sort of put him, out of the reckoning for Everton. But definitely a good enough player. I've seen him a little bit in the under-23s. He's a bit like a left-footed, Holgate when he started. Like, very slight, very lightweight. He's not gonna win every header, but he's a good footballer. So that's why I said Norwich, one of them type players. But Blackburn as well, as you say. I wouldn't profess to know much about Blackburn, but it's definitely an area of the pitch we've got a lot of options anyway.
Yeah, two things to end on there. I think someone, when I was talking about our centre halves the other day, someone messaged me saying, "Why don't we do a Walter Smith and play them all?"
Yeah. Be honest, you can play Holgate anywhere, can't you? Holgate's playing all over the pitch. He's the new Steve Watson.
Yeah, that was one another thing is we've made this video and someone in 9 months will still say, "Should we bring John Stones back?"
Yeah, every time till he retires.
So yeah, there we have it then. Thank you for watching the Toffee Blues. Let us know who your centre half options would be. Would you agree that we should be going for a stopper and someone with slightly more pace, or would you mix and match? Do you think Holgate and Godfrey are at best, or do you want John Stones back at Everton? Let us know, and we'll see you next time on the Toffee Blues.